Hello, I am Bear Wiseman, back again with, theoretically, some more Geeks. This time I have with me probably the two main masterminds from Lost in Grey, and if you haven't heard of them, kind of like, I want to say like theatrical metal. It's probably the best way, like big scenes, big characters, things like that. So I have Harri Koskela, Annela... God, I knew I was going to mess that up. Little Rajala. It's really hard to go from an L to an R in Finnish. And I think you guys are maybe at least kind of geeks?
Yeah, you could say that.
Yes. So, as I understand, you're absolutely, at very least, a music geek, and you're definitely at least a book geek. Would that be correct?
Yeah.
So, what were some of the, preliminary, books and songs and things like that? And you can both answer both, of course, but, that really got you drawn into that world?
Well, I learned to read when I was 4 years old, so I've read so many books during my life I can't even remember. And I read everything, so hard to say.
Well, for me, I think the first, music-wise, it was 8-bit Nintendo. I think the game was Chip and Dale's or something like that. It had a really cool music. I think it was on the last level of the game, and that kind of hooked me up with the game music, nerding, so to say. And Final Fantasy games was, I think, the next, which were super interesting. And well, yeah.
And of course I need to mention one author, the Swedish Astrid Lindgren, who wrote, for example, Pippi Longstocking books and such. So they, of course, were in the early childhood the books that caught me, probably.
I think we had a few different variations of Pippi Longstockings in North America. I think there was some sort of maybe 90s cartoon that I think I still know how the theme song goes, and I probably only watched it 6 times ever. And it's really frustrating that I am 36 and this song pops into my head randomly. I'm like, I didn't even watch that show.
I know the feeling.
She could lift a horse. And,
yes.
Yeah.
And she had a pet
quirks.
Monkey. And,
right. Yeah. What was her deal again? Now I'm going into this. I know what her thing was, but I've completely forgotten because it's been so long. But was she an orphan? She lived in a house by herself or something?
Yeah, she lived in a house by herself, but I think her dad was just traveling the world.
Right. That sounds right.
She was very independent.
Mm. Was there a reason that she was so strong, or was she just a buff kid? Because lifting a horse, that's some honestly kind of crazy shit.
I can't remember.
I don't remember if that was magic or if she was just strong.
Yeah.
That's unreasonably strong for a child. If you're a child watching this, please do not lift horses.
Unless it's a really small pony.
Yeah. You can lift My Little Pony action figures.
Yeah.
All the way over your head. That's totally fine. I think she was kind of maybe more of the Scandinavian Nordic Anne of Green Gables, which I think still maybe, I don't know, maybe Little House on the Prairie was more of the American thing, and Anne of Green Gables was the Canadian one because of course it was a Canadian story. But it was the young girl with also red braids who was on her own and adopted by this I think older, they weren't a couple, they were brother and sister who run a farm together, and it's all about her spunk and joie de vivre as she goes on with her life, and it's very charming and it's delightful. And the made-for-TV movie from the, I want to say 80s is probably one of the best TV adaptations of anything I've ever seen. It's almost flawless. I would have to read the book again to actually remember if there's anything wrong with it. It follows really closely. It's like 4 hours long, so... Obviously, if you did a made-for-TV movie, you probably had a bit more time to actually put the entire story into what you were producing, I guess. Then, I'd say Final Fantasy, another, like, big deal. Nobuo Uematsu. Ugh, I can't pronounce anything today. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean
Uematsu. Like, iconic soundtracks for sure. So what were some of your favorites? Like...
Damn, I really can't remember the names, but if I remember correctly, it was in Final Fantasy VII. Because that one we played with my cousin like a lot when it came out. But one of them was this kind of piano theme melody. Really cannot remember the name, but I rehearsed it from like note to note with our piano, and it was super interesting. And I really love the themes and the kind of variation in the whole, like, yeah, musical variation of the themes.
I think Final Fantasy was one of the, like, first series where I started really, like, noticing the music in the game and, like, feeling the atmosphere expand because of that. Like, Final Fantasy IX was my first, so obviously a special place in my heart because I just love everything about that game. Like, the story is great, the characters are great, for a turn-based system, the battle system's fine. Even for, like, a kind of cheesy old Japanese RPG, like, it's surprisingly deep and not too many gaping suspicious plot holes like in Final Fantasy VII that make it hard to follow. You know, they throw a, like, just total deus ex machina, like, final boss in at the end, but the rest of that, it's a great game. And there's these moments, like, I think character themes I started to notice for the first time there. Like, the character of Beatrix, who's the knight who is really, like, loyal and diligent and good at her job, but she's starting to have conflicting morals about what she's being told to do. And it plays this just utterly mournful piano ballad anytime she comes on the screen. And I was just watching her just like, oh, you're so cool. And to this day I get, like, all choked up anytime I hear that song. It's just magnificent.
Yeah, and I do agree what you said about that. I think I started to realize the kind of importance of music in the games with Final Fantasy stuff, because you really can feel the theme changes and mood changes in the game. So it's super nicely done.
I love the way, I never really thought about this when I was young and actually experiencing it, but I became aware of it as I grew older, but how they create the music in a way that it just kind of loops until you leave an area. I was always wondering, like, could that somehow be translated into, like, reading a book? That if there was some sort of app for your, like, your ebooks or whatever, that as long as, wherever you're, like, reading, like, as the page turns, like, the music progresses or something. Yeah. I feel like that sounds really complicated, but there's this weird part of me that's like, it would be so cool. I could have music to my books.
Yeah, I think that would be completely doable. But of course you would have to have ebooks or something like that. But
yeah, and
it would be super cool.
You might have to space the pages in kind of a weird way. That, you might have just, like, one small paragraph per page because then you need the music to progress or something. Yeah. But the idea of it intrigues me deeply. This is stuff that I'm one of these people who just has, like, insane ideas, but then I'm like, damn, there's really only one of me. I can't execute all of these things, so I have to focus on the ones that are more practical. But every once in a while I have an idea like this that's like, man, I wish I knew anything about technology so that I could make that a real thing.
Yeah, but it would be super cool. Like on the children's books, like, bling, change the page.
Yeah. He unsheaths the sword. and then the music plays like do 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 do. There's so much you could do with that. Just you're reading like epic fantasy adventures, and you've got like, you know, score music playing as you're reading through, or like battle scenes have like intense sounds and like sword fighting or something. I think it would be magnificent. Probably that whole thing will get skipped until like reading becomes a VR thing.
Yeah.
I still think it would be cool. If someone wants to make this technology, do it.
Yeah, here's the hint.
Giving you free ideas. Take them and run. Somewhere off in Silicon Valley, someone's doing something wonderful now. Is it the same with like good tech ideas as it is with porn, that like as soon as you say it as an idea, it exists on the internet?
Yeah. Like the minute after.
Yeah. Someone's already looking for angel funding. And
Yeah.
Last time we were doing an Unleashed interview, you were playing some music from this Ori and the Blind Forest or Ori and the Will of the Wisp. I don't remember which, but it was really good music. And I went home and I got a Switch like 2 weeks ago, and I played that game through, and it was horrifying.
Really?
It was extremely emotionally devastating from the very beginning.
Yeah, I've never played it, but I've listened to the soundtracks like a million times already.
It's very magical world, like, but it really just kind of kicks you right in the face, right in the beginning. It's like, oh, look at these sweet creatures who, like, meet and take care of each other and become family, and then they die. You're like, oh, okay. That was rough. And then they kind of, you know, spoilers, both get revived and go on to save the forest or whatnot. But I was just like, whoa, this is a whole lot I was not expecting right now.
Yeah, that's a funny thing, because I've thought about when listening to the was it Will of the Wisps or whatever, because they have these kind of really dark themes and ominous, pelottavia, scary themes in between, and I really thought that, okay, what's happening in the game now?
That's actually really interesting. That would be a fun game to play if you could figure out what scenes are happening. If, you know, the soundtrack isn't obviously named like Battle Theme 5 or something. I imagine those just have like pretty song titles. But there's like a few points in that game where you have to escape from somewhere. So there's probably, I would imagine, a few really tense themes of like, you're butt clenched, like, don't mess up the sequence, don't, holy hell, oh my goodness. It's kind of a bitchy game, I'm not gonna lie. It's a platformer, and it involves a lot of, like, execute a sequence without fucking up at all, and, like, all of these escape scenes are just like, oh, the volcano's exploding, and that means there's no safe space for you to save in, so you just have to do this whole sequence of escaping a volcano flawlessly without messing up. And I'm like, I'm too old for this, come on, I'm not 16 anymore. Platformers, you don't need to keep upping the difficulty. Mega Man was hard enough. You're supposed to make the graphics better, not the game so much harder. I am an absolute liar, though. I have not played Mega Man. I don't think ever.
I've played a lot.
It's one of the few ones that I haven't actually played, and I don't know why. Everyone says Mega Man's great. I can't say why I haven't played it.
Yeah, that's one of the games also what hooked me up with the game soundtracks, because they are super great. Like especially the first ones, because you played them a lot when you were a kid. So.
And you've also made some chiptune music and such.
Yeah.
Something you could expect to hear in a game or old 80s.
Similar kind of stuff. Tracker stuff.
I love that stuff. Like Dr. Wily's Castle, I think. I've never played a Mega Man game, but I know that theme intimately because it's just that good.
Yeah, it really is.
I think probably because so many people on the internet have covered it, I eventually came across it, and then, you know, like the Score Orchestra will play it, the Game Music Collective will play it.
Yeah.
Like, I think Taylor Davis is like this kind of geek violinist on YouTube. Pretty sure she's played it. And
Yeah.
it's everywhere, and for good reason.
Yeah, it's been covered a lot. And a lot of really good covers, actually.
Have you guys ever been to any of those game music concerts around here?
Shame to say that I haven't. I should. I think we should.
They're really fun.
Yeah.
I will say that the last Score show, I think that it was, that we went to, we were really close to the front, and I think that kind of messed up the show a little bit somehow, and maybe you guys can explain this better because you know these acoustics. But we were like lower than the stage, and we couldn't hear like almost any percussion somehow. And so many of the songs require on like the big bombast of like like the theme song from Assassin's Creed Black Flag. You need that like dun 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 dun. You need to like feel that in your bones, and that's what makes you just sit there going like, whoa, fuck yeah. And somehow like without the percussion, it was just like da 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 da.
Yeah, it really needs it quite a lot. That's weird. I really don't know anything about orchestral placements or that, but it could have been that they're just too far behind something.
Yeah, 'cause I think like there was a stage, and then they were either maybe even up a little higher from that, and then we were like down here below the stage. So I don't know if just all of the sound was completely going over our heads or something.
That could be.
'Cause they were maybe like a full like meter above us. I don't know. It was such a bummer, I know, especially because that was the second time we saw Score, and the first time that song was so good. It's like the first song that they play in their sets, and it's so good, and I haven't myself played an Assassin's Creed game. I've watched other people play, but never myself, so I didn't know much about the music, and I do have that like little sweet spot where I love pirate music, probably because of Pirates of the Caribbean. I loved those movies back in the day. But so like this like awesome like Rogues on the Waves music comes, and as I said, like the percussion just goes right through you and you're flying off the back of your chair.
Yeah, that's how it should be.
To know what that was like, and then to see it a second time without that feeling was a little bit soul crushing. I won't deny. It was really a good show though. It's like a Swedish group. It's called Score that puts it on, and they do other stuff like horror movie music and things like that. I can try, and I'm gonna immediately mess this up again. The guy's name is Orvar Safström, I think. He's a Swedish guy, and he's done some work on like promotion with like some video game companies or something. So I think maybe Ubisoft like sponsors the shows once in a while, or something along those lines. But they're really good, as long as you have good seats, I guess.
Yeah.
And they have I think a soprano who sings with them as well. So they'll do like the Bloodborne with all the like really like freaky opera vocals and everything. And she's just this like petite woman, and then just making these like horrible wails. It's magnificent.
Yeah, I think I've seen their stuff on YouTube, maybe.
Yeah, I think they have like one of their whole shows from like a Swedish radio performance or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was it.
Oh, magnificent.
Yeah.
And I think they played almost the same show here as that one the first time, but I think the Mega Man suite was swapped out for the Sonic the Hedgehog suite, so it wasn't the exact same. But yeah, like pretty much the same thing. Arguably, one might have preferred Mega Man soundtrack to Sonic soundtrack. Weirdly
I
enough.
think I would have.
Sonic soundtracks are great, but I feel like they don't have a lot of like individually memorable tracks.
Yeah, you could say that, because I come to think of it, I really don't remember any music.
Yeah, I'd probably recognize a couple songs immediately if I heard them.
Yeah.
I would say like, oh yeah, that's the music from the Green Hill Zone or whatever, but couldn't tell you what a song's called. I couldn't tell you like a theme song. There's no like like super catchy, simple melody that's gonna get replayed over and over and stuck in your head. I got nothing from Sonic.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, I still haven't played those games. Dr. Wily's Castle. Is that I should probably ask, is that like a boss fight, or what is that music from?
I really don't remember, because it's been such a long time. But yeah, those kind of themes they get stuck in your head, like really.
Yeah, another thing I wanted to ask about then. Do you guys watch a lot of movies or more reading and music?
Yeah, we do.
And TV series.
Yeah, nowadays, but I think we used to watch a lot of movies before Netflix and HBO ruled it all. But yeah, quite a lot. And especially because I think nowadays in series, the music is really, really good also.
Oh, it's true. Took me a while to get on board with the, I'm not even going to try and pronounce the name of the dude who did the Game of Thrones soundtrack. It wasn't as, I think, amped up on the theme song as everyone else was, but I think after, 5 seasons, I was just like, okay, yeah, do, along with everyone else. But, I'm trying to think. So, you're a reader, and if you guys watch a lot of stuff, then what are some of the better things that have transitioned from books onto the screen? And if you like, what are some of the worst?
That's a tough question. I don't know.
Don't look at me. I don't read books.
But I do, even though I have never played much games, that movie adaptation of Silent Hill, I don't care about the story, but the visuals are so impressive. So that, and that has also maybe affected a little bit the Grey Realms world. Grey and raining ash and.
Yeah,
stuff,
I remember because we talked about that a lot when we were forming Lost in Grey and throwing here and forth the ideas for visuals
and then also for the Wasteland album, I remember the game Fallout and then the Mad Max movies, so that also maybe affected a bit the visuals for that album.
I dig that. That makes perfect sense, because I think the vibe when I think about the story or listen to the music is kind of that vaguely Silent Hill kind of feeling of oh yeah, everything's just kind of in a suspicious fog all the time.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, did I have an example? Of course, well, everyone's got all sorts of opinions about Game of Thrones and how well that was adapted. But do you remember, did you read Lord of the Rings before the movies came out?
Yes, I think so. I was maybe 14, and now I don't remember when the first movie came out.
I want to say it was around 2004 or 5.
Yeah, so a few years before that.
Yeah. How do you remember liking it when it came out?
I'm not sure. I thought it was a very long movie, and I'm not very good with, or I don't, my patience doesn't really fit very, very long movies, or I have to take breaks every now and then. So yeah, I'm not sure. I do remember, was it Legolas? He was kind of handsome. That's the most important part.
Yeah.
So
Naturally.
Good-looking guys. Yeah, but from reading the book, I remember the first 100 pages was a horror. I was so bored, and I was already about to give up reading. But then it got started, and then I enjoyed reading.
I think probably Tom Bombadil put you to sleep under the Barrow Wights or something. Wasn't everyone super happy? No, everyone was really upset that he was removed from the movies, but across the board decision, and like any interpretation of Lord of the Rings ever made is just the scene does not matter. Just like don't include it in anything. You have to like hire other people, you have to do other special effects, just leave it out. Tom Bombadil does nothing. He just helps them from a situation that they're in at that moment. He has no long-term effects on anything. Still, like, fans have just devastated outcries.
Yeah, and you can imagine how the writer must feel. Like, that. I think for me it would be weird. Okay, then I would be maybe such a writer that I wouldn't let anyone make the movie except myself. So
yeah, the more you hear about Neil Gaiman and like the varying degrees of good and bad experiences he's had with like having his stuff adapted, I'm pretty sure I've heard stories on like the full spectrum of experience that are just the worst of all time to like, yeah, this is pretty much what I wrote. But it's also really weird because everyone seems to have a hugely different vision of like how they want to do his stuff. Like, I think Good Omens was really British somehow, and I don't always mesh best with British humor. I find it a little like in your face sometimes. So I was a little put off by that at first, but I should continue watching it. And American Gods was just over the top artsy at times. Like slow motion blood and gore scenes for like really long times, and then just like conversation. And it's all really intense and like shadowy and all with like I don't even know if it necessarily suits the story that much. It's about like Norse gods and modern like New Age gods kind of. American Gods, they're like technology and money and stuff. So. But yeah, like, and then what else of his stuff has been done? I'm trying to think. Coraline, the like more like stop motion movie. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It's very freaky. If you like a children's movie that will like give you the creeps before going to bed, that's a pretty solid choice.
Okay.
Neil Gaiman is maybe better in his more like medium length stuff. I don't know. Have you read any of his?
I've read the cartoon adaptations or something, but not a book, I think.
Sandman was the one that came out recently. I knew there was something fresh. That was great. That was probably the best adaptation of his stuff that I've seen. But it was pretty true to the material, as far as I remember the material. It was a graphic novel, I think, and it's weird, so adapting to the TV, pretty good job. I could recommend that.
I think we should definitely check it out.
Yeah. Then also one book that has been made into a film, Hitchhiker's Guide Through the Galaxy. I think there the best jokes were, of course, left out from the movie, or so it was. I've only seen it once, and that's a long time ago, so I don't remember very correctly, or very in detail. But yeah, it's best to read the book.
I've heard. I really, again, I confess, that's been on my list for like probably 30 years or something at this point, and I still haven't read it, and I don't know why. It's not even that long, but
you have to read it.
But I remember like when that movie came out, thinking like, haha, okay, yeah, this is pretty funny, and then everyone just being like, no, it's not. I was like, okay, you do better than book, and then I just never picked up the book. I don't know if maybe I have like a fear that it cannot possibly be as funny as everyone says it is. I'm sure it is, but maybe just I'm nervous because my expectations are so high. That said, I've actually never heard anyone say, you know what, I didn't really like that book. I think everyone likes Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
You have to read it too.
Okay.
Book
Starting
club.
today.
Book club, we regroup in 1 month. We discuss Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
New podcast offshoot. Geek book club.
And of course, Terry Pratchett books. I don't know if there are any movie adaptations of those.
There are a couple.
Okay.
They're more like, again, like maybe some like British made-for-TV movies, but The Hogfather was like a 2-part holiday special, I think, for TV. And I think 2 more of them have been adapted, but I don't remember which ones. Guards might have been one of them. Probably something with Susan. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and ramble off Terry Pratchett novels that I haven't read. I love him. I've read surprisingly few of his books, though. I think I wanted to do, like, the just straight through release order Discworld read, and I honestly could not tell you how many books I got into it. It was maybe like 4. So I got embarrassed that my Animorphs reread went way longer. And I got like 15 books into that one. I can never remember, were Animorphs a thing in Finland?
I'm not sure.
That was definitely an influential, vaguely geek thing for me. It's like I think it's very much got like the rad teen vibe from the 90s. So I guess it's like kind of teenage superheroes. It's very like dramatic, like, this is my name. It's not my real name. I can't tell you my real name because they could find me. So it's really dramatic. And it's about these like kids who are walking through a construction site at night coming home from the mall. And they witness like an alien murder and then are given superpowers so that they can save the world from an infestation of alien slugs that crawl into your ear and take over your brain and make you their slave. And their superpower is that any animal that they touch, they can absorb that DNA and then they can morph into it. And apparently, I didn't realize this until more recently, like, there's a lot of body horror, too, because every time they morph into an animal, it's like, my bones melt and my skin, like, sprouts feathers, and, like, it's always horrible, and...
Yikes.
Like, turning into a fly, like, their eyes just, like, bulge out, and a huge proboscis comes off their face or something, and... I was rereading these as an adult, and I was like, okay, first of all, like, the animal psychology for the 90s was surprisingly accurate. The one thing that they constantly got wrong was that they always talked about their knees reversing because they didn't understand that this is the bone that people, like, your heel is the bone that you're looking at on an animal. So they thought that, like, their bones had to realign. They didn't understand, like, leg anatomy. But, like, everything else, like, because when they would morph into an animal, they would, like, take on its instincts. And this, again, led to, like, some truly horrifying situations when they don't know what they're going into, and they morph into, like, ants, but not in their own territory, and then other ants just show up and start killing them all, and they have to, like, demorph in, like, underneath someone's backyard, and then they're like, all of them have like weird PTSD all the time, and they're all clearly in like high school or middle school or something like this, so they're all trying to keep up appearances as they're like out at night saving the world, and then all of them like come home in the morning like just traumatized from like having murdered someone the night before, and they're 14 and they're just
no.
Hey Jake, how's breakfast? It's fine. I'm doing great right now. It's honestly surprisingly intense for a book for teenagers, and I just remember being a kid thinking like, man, I wish I could morph into a hawk. But I think, yeah, it was like this series that goes on about this infestation of these like parasites and how they're slowly trying to take over the world. There's definitely like references to the real world, like there was a guy who was clearly Bill Gates who got all of his technological genius by having a symbiotic relationship with the parasite instead of a parasitic one. And, like, they kind of like, yeah, you can use my body if you can make me, like, rich with alien technology, essentially. So
Of course.
that's where Microsoft in the Animorphs world came from, I guess. And it goes on, like, I never did finish reading the series. Again, spoilers, apparently, like, one of them dies in the end, and then, like, another one has just, like, his life just kind of, like, goes to shit because he has such bad PTSD. And, like, another one goes on to use his morphing talents to be in, like, movies and be famous or something. And then, like, the last one, who was early on stuck in the body of a hawk, takes the dead girl's ashes, flies out to sea, and never comes back. It's like, and again, these are young adult books. These are for, like, teenagers. This was surprisingly heavy. It's wild. I had no idea when I was young that it was going to go there. I've been told other things too, like, I don't know, like the whole city collapses and all sorts of crazy stuff happens as the whole story reaches its climax, but surprisingly decent stories for the 90s. Although I do remember they tried to make a TV adaptation out of it, and it was terrible.
Yeah, that I could
Surprise,
imagine.
surprise. I distinctly remember, this is such a stupid thing, but I was, like, raised by wilderness people outdoors, and, like, I can name all of the birds in Canada and whatnot, so this bird was clearly on the TV show not a red-tailed hawk, and the character is always going on about very specifically being a red-tailed hawk, and I'm just a kid that's not a red-tailed hawk. Little, like, actually nerd. The cat's just like, Mom, I can't watch this show about my favorite books because that's not a red-tailed hawk, and my mom was probably just like, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because it does. You should do your research.
That's something, that's probably an eagle. Do you have any favorite, like, 90s classics with that in mind?
There was this TV series where the kids would gather around a bonfire and tell horror stories to each other.
Yeah, that was
and that was horrifying. I still have nightmares about some of those.
Yeah, and that was like a kids show.
Yeah.
So, like, we had one, I think, that was kind of like that. It was called Goosebumps. And it was based off, I think, a book series. That they were just telling stories from the books or something. But I think I never liked horror. My imagination was way too off the rails for me to ever really handle horror very much. So horror has to be really over the top, or else it would give me, like, hardcore nightmares and I couldn't go out after dark forever. And I'm not exaggerating. In high school, a horror movie kept me indoors after dark for 2 years. When I was, like, 16 or something. So when I was young, definitely couldn't handle Goosebumps. I think, like, it creeped me out, like, one time that I kind of tuned in a little, and I was just like, nope. I also got freaked out somehow by Winnie the Pooh, though. So there was a cartoon, and I remember something happening, and it absolutely terrifying me. It was... My entire life I've been curious to honestly, like, look this up and see what it was, because I just have this vision in my mind of, like, some sort of, like, house on wheels, like, chasing them down a hill. And it, like, I don't know if they were in the house or if it was chasing them, but, like, the whole thing was, like, coming straight at the screen, and probably everyone was screaming or something, and it was horrifying, and I didn't really understand what was happening, I think, and it just scared me.
In the Muumins series and the films, there were also some very scary elements that still kind of like...
Yeah, Moomin Mörkö.
Yeah.
I remember having nightmares when I was, like, super tiny kid.
Yeah, and then the movie with the comet, I think that was so scary I could never watch it again, so it was so...
I think I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I've heard the tales of, like, so many kids, like, you can't make the, like, noise, or people will still just, like, clench their entire body.
Yeah. Yeah, at this age also, like
Yeah.
you still, you really don't want to hear it at night.
I feel like not having grown up with that series, like, I'd be like, man, that would just be the ultimate way to torment one of your siblings. And I feel like Finnish people would reply to that and just be like, no, we didn't go there. That was crossing a line. You don't fake murder.
yeah.
It's too, like, I absolutely, like, if one of my brothers was scared of that sound, I would have chased them with it. But, I mean, in reality, it would have been the other way around, obviously. But one of my brothers was afraid of toe socks. That was just, yeah.
All right.
I still remember. And so, yeah, if he was ever pissing me off, I would put on the toe socks and just wiggle my feet at him. And that was honestly surprisingly efficient in making him go away.
Yeah.
So, what are some of your favorite anything's really? Books, movies, movie scores, game scores, book scores. Wait, there's only one of those, and it was done by Tuomas Välimaa. So, a pretty good book score, I'm not gonna lie. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too.
Well, for me, a few books or authors I simply have to mention. The book Walk Away by Cory Doctorow, actually a Canadian author, that has been in the recent years one of the best books I've read, and it has had quite a lot of technological stuff in it too, which went straight over my head, but the story was very, very interesting. And shortly, it's about a world where there's actually no shortage of anything. You can pretty much 3D print anything and so on, but still there are hierarchies in the, like, social hierarchies and so on. So some people have it quite a lot better than others, and yeah, that is top one for recent years. Then also this Finnish author, the name will come back in a second, but his book Sarasvatin hiekka, Sands of Sarasvati, it's also translated into English. Those are kind of ecological thrillers, and because he's also a scientist, so he's very accurate with many of the climatic change stuff and such that he writes about, and he's written many books which are excellent. Then another Finnish author, Johanna Sinisalo, she has kind of this speculative fiction type of books, and those are very interesting. And I think, yeah, she has also won many awards, and some of her books have been translated into English.
I feel like her name's familiar to me, but I can't remember if that was because you've already recommended her to me or not. So.
Could be.
Yeah. I think at some point I had recommended you the soundtrack to Hollow Knight. Did you ever give that a spin?
Yeah, I did. But I think I spin it a couple of times, but I really think I should do it again.
I do recommend the game as well. That was another one like Final Fantasy IX that just checks all the boxes of like game design, gameplay, map, everything, music, story. Just delightful game, and like a light Dark Souls level of hard. So it's like tough, but not like smash your face tough.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the few soundtracks that I know that like if I just put it on to listen to it, I'm like start inching over to like the controller and like no, you're not playing that game again. You have other things to do. But that's how good the music is. It just starts to like suck me back into that world where I want to go play the game again and run around underground with all the little bug people and
Yeah, and that's when you really know that the score is good.
Yeah, it's wonderful. All of it, just the whole thing. The only funny part about it is that the first song on the soundtrack, I don't know if it's the theme or something else, It might be because it's from earlier on in the game. Whenever it's on a playlist, I can never remember what soundtrack it's from because it sounds a little bit different from all of the ambient in-game music. And it's really confusing because it sounds like something off some other soundtrack. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone to look it up and it's been like, oh, it's this song again. It's just 50, 60 times at this point. What is this? It's cool, but I have no idea what it's from. And that you'd think I'd remember.
Yeah, but there's always some music what makes you do that. We're always like, it sounds really good. But then it's always the same song.
So what are some of your all-time favorite soundtracks?
Okay, well, maybe start with the movies. I think Inception must be maybe the favorite because I really love how they've kind of blend synthesizers and orchestra stuff, and it really works well in my opinion. And then Interstellar, yeah, of course, that's also a great one. Pirates of the Caribbean, of course, that's really good.
So you are a fan of Hans Zimmer?
Yes, you could maybe say that. And yeah, basically anything that he does, I instantly like. But I think it's because I really like these kind of pompous, huge scores, so it works really well.
Weird recommendation from Hans Zimmer. The soundtrack he did for like a rom-com in like 2005 or something called The Holiday. There's the movie itself is it's a rom-com, so but the soundtrack is just so somehow bouncy because one part of the story involves this character meeting an old composer of like movie scores. So a lot of the score is done with like kind of the flavor of classic movie scores. So you have a song called Gumption that just sounds like gumption. I honestly don't even really know what gumption means, but you can feel it in the song, and I think it's called The Holiday. And
I think I've listened to it because I usually when I don't know what to listen, I just kind of Hans Zimmer something.
But then also Blade Runner.
Yeah. I think that was the most listened album on my Spotify last year. Like I listened to it every day for like a couple of hours at least.
New Blade Runner or classic Blade Runner?
The classic. And yeah, there's a lot, and like game wise, I already said that of course like the classics. I because I really kind of feel that my histories in the 8-bit Nintendo stuff. So of course Super Mario is obvious, but like Mega Man stuff and Chip and Dale's perfect. And I think Castlevania was really cool also, and there's and everything Legend of Zelda stuff, of course.
And then from more recent TV series, we've been listening quite a lot to the Vikings series soundtrack.
Yeah, that was like really good.
Yeah.
Okay, Game of Thrones was good too, but I think I preferred more the Vikings stuff.
I can see that. At least I didn't watch very much of Vikings, but I remember it having like really nice audio ambience at least.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I can't exactly say what didn't keep me in that show. I don't know if I was like, if I thought it was too serious or something, but for someone who's such like a legendary like geek who loves anything vaguely fantasy related, so even if it's like historical or not, like Vikings, Norse stuff, cool, like yes, absolutely. And the same with Black Flag, that pirates show. Like, absolutely, yes, 100% things I love. I love pirates. Like, again, anything kind of like dumb fantasy. I'll absolutely try it out. Both of those shows, I just somehow couldn't get more than like 6 episodes through, and for the life of me, I can't explain why. Everything about them was good. Stories were good and interesting and exciting, and I just never felt compelled to go back, and I don't know why.
I think the same happened to me with Game of Thrones. I think when the TV series started, I think I tried to watch it for like 1 episode or half episode. I was like, oh, this is so fucking boring.
Yeah, same here.
And then we just recently, I think it was last year, we watched binge watched the whole series.
So, how did that go? That's actually honestly got to be kind of an interesting take, because like for many of us, we had to wait for those episodes, and then we had to wait to find out what a shitty ending is. So
yeah.
You guys just got to power right on through that train wreck.
Yeah, but and everybody was saying like, oh, okay, wait for the last season and blah 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 blah. I think it was good.
Yeah, me too.
But of course, because we watched it in such intense time, so
How long took it?
I really don't remember, but it was maybe like 2 weeks or something.
Damn. Solid, what, 8 seasons of like almost hour-long episodes?
Yeah.
Nice. Man, I'm trying to think of like, when's the fastest I watched a show? I watched an anime in a day once, like a 22-episode anime. It had a strange name as Utawareru Mono, I think, and I watched the entire show just because I wanted to know why there was a mask stuck to the main character's face, only to find out in the final episode that it was just part of his face. And I was just like, well, that's a day of my life that I'm never getting back. I thought it was going to be some weird, trippy, Japanese, crazy nonsense, and it was just part of his face. That might have been one of the most disappointing things I've ever seen. Have you read much fantasy? I find like trying to like get back into older fantasy is very hard because it's written a little bit differently nowadays than it used to be.
I read some, yes, but they were, I think, mainly Finnish fantasy series.
What kind of fantasy was like common in Finland? Was it more like stuff to do with trolls and tontus and stuff like that?
Well, of course, one of Johanna Sinisalo's books, Ennen päivänlaskua ei voi, there was about a troll and a human being. And I don't know if that's then fantasy or sci-fi or what. It's different, definitely. But the books I read, I think, well, they had old, maybe medieval towns and some magic perhaps and such, but I don't remember many trolls or elves.
I think the closest thing to like Finnish fantasy that I've read is just the Suuri Tonttu-kirja, which is a staple of my house. And I think I even found like the pocket Tonttu-kirja, like a classic one, and I gave it to my mom just because she really liked the pictures in it. She's like, this is magical, I love this, and so I found her a little version. So it's kind of sad that she can't read any of it because it's delightful, but I love it. It's just like a classic like book. It could be on like animals or something, but instead it's like the culture of tiny Finnish people who live in trees and whatnot. And it's got just so many funny little details and stuff. They've got, you know, even like herbal remedies that are like real, like the tontu's like chamomile to go to sleep or something. Like, chamomile tea is supposed to make you sleepy. That checks out. It's delightful. Whoever did that did a wonderful job. I guess. Well, Mauri Kunnas. Does he count as fantasy?
I don't know. Or is it just like
Children's
fiction?
Yeah.
But he also does like kind of more of these fact stories, like historical stuff. I think he's done something about the Finnish history told by these dogs. And then
more like educational stuff.
And I remember from my childhood, for example, a book about like how a daily paper is done, and it was really fascinating. So yeah, educational stuff as well.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever read the old Don Rosa Aku Ankka books or Roopeseta?
I've read some of them, and all the Donald Ducks and so on.
So have you read the what is the Tuomas Välimaa albums about the life and times of Scrooge?
Probably that also.
No,
back in the days.
I've listened to the score.
Yeah, you never were really into Donald Duck or any.
Not that much. I think at some point when we were traveling somewhere when I was a kid, I maybe looked through the pictures, but it really wasn't my thing.
I actually once had a what's the word when you in school have to give a presentation? Yes, I was in 5th or 6th grade, and I gave a presentation about the Finnish Donald Duck series and how it impacts language and teaches stuff, very interesting historical facts and such. And I remember our teacher, who was the principal, he was like completely the opposite opinion, and we had a huge argument and so on. And then some 20 years later, Aku Ankka was actually awarded for providing or being such a big cultural impact and shaping language and teaching historical stuff and so on. And I went to the principal like, ha ha, I told you.
It's always so interesting when I moved here to think about like Aku Ankka. For those of you who don't know, is Donald Duck. Roopeseta is Uncle Scrooge, and like that was just absolutely not a thing in North America. Like, of course, we all knew who Donald Duck was, but we did not have Donald Duck comics, or they weren't very common if we did. It was more Archie comics. It was just Archie and the gang, and they were just mostly teenager drama, but then sometimes skinned with like different themes for seasons or whatever. But I always thought that maybe like that's a good place for people who want to start learning Finnish, is just to read some Aku Ankka books.
Indeed.
Yeah. That would work perfectly.
Also, I collected these pocket books because the weekly Aku Ankka paper, it was only like 40 pages, so I read it in 15 minutes. But then the thicker comic books, there was much more to read, and I collected them. I must have had hundreds of those.
Yeah, I think they've always been on my list of things for practicing Finnish, is Aku Ankka books, and then the like old Muumi cartoon.
Yes.
I remember when I first moved here, speaking of horrifying things, someone showed me the episode with like the ice princess or something like that, where Pikkumu gets turned into frozen, or gets completely frozen solid or something like that. And I was expecting, like, they're like, okay, like, this is the episode with the ice princess. I thought it was going to be like some freaky, beautiful blue woman, and then instead it's this just like horrible block of polygons and colors, and I was just like, this is somehow more scary. What is that? Marka got nothing on this thing. Who? Why? To this day, I don't understand. I probably also don't remember what it looks like very accurately anymore. It's been a long time since I saw that. But I'm sad I've only actually watched like a few of those episodes, and I should really watch more of it. Because I've read some of the English translations of the Muumi books, but even that's been a while, and I'm starting to forget. I'm starting to forget Muumi is a thing, which is a shame. Everyone loves Muumi. Muumi is the best. I'm glad I have some friends in the US now who keep reminding me that they love Muumi, so I'm like, oh, right. Alright, just because most people talk about this at some point on the podcast. Generally speaking, how do you feel about Star Wars?
I'm not sure if I've ever watched a whole movie throughout. I admit.
I'm shocked. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. I haven't watched the new films at all. But of course, the old classics, I love them. Especially the music also, because it's really good. But yeah, maybe we should do some Star Wars research and watch every single movie there is.
It's getting out of control now, I think. It's gone kind of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's just, there's too much now. It's oversaturated, so you're kind of looking... What used to be all treasure is now kind of a lot of turds with a few treasures in it. So, you know, like, I actually haven't seen The Mandalorian yet. I've heard exclusively great things about that. I did watch Andor, but like that show is like, okay, so here's this movie Rogue One. This is the main character. We're gonna make an entire series of a show to explain to you the backstory of this one character, yeah. And it's like, but he dies in the end. I don't even care who he is. Like, honestly, like, it's still a surprisingly good show for what I was really expecting, but at the same time, for the first half of the show, it's just like, why do I care? And that's kind of, I feel like, what a lot of Star Wars has turned into now, unfortunately. But
yeah, and one of our friends actually said to us a couple of years ago already that he gave us a list on which order we should watch the movies and such to get a clear view or something, but it was too much.
I remember, I think I actually mentioned this on a previous episode, but I remember at least after the second trilogy had come out that there was sort of a way to salvage the movies by watching them in a different order. And I don't remember exactly what it was. You had to like watch A New Hope, and then you had to like flash back to like Anakin's origins or something, and then you had to continue. I don't know exactly how it went, but there was some way that kind of like, as it was shuffled, the way things were revealed came out in a way that works better.
Yeah, something like that. It was the same thing.
Because, like, if you watch them chronologically and you haven't seen them, the first three movies do so many callbacks to the original trilogy that all of the cool stuff in the trilogy in the original trilogy will get spoiled for you.
Yeah.
Like, who's Luke's father?
Yeah.
They name his offspring at the end of the third movie. So, like... But, yeah, like, again, I don't know, do you guys pay any attention to the Marvel Cinematic Universe? But same sort of thing is, like, it started out with, like, okay, superhero movies. This is great. And then eventually people were like, you're kind of just making the same movie over and over again. So they started to sneak a little bit more into them and actually put, like, some decent stories, some decent characters in there. And then I'm not going to go on a tirade about how they ruined it all with Endgame, but but then after that, then, you know, like, I don't know, like, what the corporate system that makes this happen is like behind the scenes, but, like, then they've got, like, okay, this is, like, I don't know, they've got terms for it all, that, like, this is the first season, but it's not a season, it's, like, the spectrum, I forget, there's a phrase for it now, but, oh man, just, like, the whole, like, yeah, we've got like this show coming out here, which is supplementing this movie, and then this is going to be promoting this, and then this is happening, and it's just like, yeah, but you fucked up the last climax, so why do I care now? You made a really good movie with Infinity War, and then you pooped all over it in the next movie that came after. Possibly unpopular opinion. I know a lot of people liked Endgame, but I didn't. I thought it was really, really bad. But all of these things, like, I loved at first how, like, interconnected they were, and, like, this movie teases the next one, and it's, like, giving you little hints, and I thought that was really fun. And somehow now I feel like I'm being bombarded from all sides by things that I can't keep up with, and not all of them are even that good anymore, and it's kind of exhausting.
Yeah, because idea-wise, it's really cool. If you think about, like, music or your story behind Lost in Grey, we want to kind of connect the albums and the stories. And
Yeah, having an extended universe.
Yeah. And it works until you fuck it up.
Yeah. Actually, now that you mention that, you know, maybe the people who I find have been most successful with that are actually musicians. Like, there's a lot of artists who've done great concept albums, like Unleash the Archers had, what it was, Apex and something else that started with an A, and that was like, kind of like their version of a musical fantasy story, and then their version of a musical sci-fi sequel to it, and, like, I listened to them in reverse order because I discovered them with the second one, so Abyss, that was what it was called. And so I discovered Abyss, and then I went back and listened to Apex, so I liked Abyss better. Surprisingly, because I'm generally more of a fantasy than a sci-fi person. But it's just a really good album. I recommend it. But they did a great job of those, of just like capturing the spirit and still telling the story. Machine Supremacy are fun because they have kind of like their overall universe, and sometimes they're telling stories in it, and sometimes they're just doing whatever they want. So you get this whole like group of their fans. They're such like an internet original band that they've got tons of fans online who can just sit there and speculate, like, could this song be about part of the external universe, or is it just a one-shot? Who knows? We can never find out.
Yeah, but that's super cool.
Yeah, and you're keeping people engaged and wondering all the time. And then, of course, Arion, for example, like, I think pretty much, like, all of the Arion albums are supposed to take place within the same universe. And, man, Arjen Lucassen is just a magnificent genius. So
yeah, he is.
Even if I have had some maybe minor plot holes in the extended universe between 01011001 and the source, I think there's maybe something I question a little bit in there that was maybe an oopsie, but I'm not allowed to like nerd rage over that stuff. I think it's unhealthy, so I'm not allowed to do it, but every once in a while a little story will get me like, nope, you just messed it up a little, damn it. But who else has like a great
Devin Townsend?
Ziltoid?
That's perfect. One of the funniest stuff ever. And it's kind of, I love the humor aspect as well. It's really greatly done, like musician-wise and composing-wise. And then you have a alien who wants all of our
coffee.
Like, somehow, like, for coffee lovers, that album is just a little bit too relatable.
yeah, it is.
Did you ever watch that Metalocalypse show back in the day about the metal band that was going to cause the apocalypse or something? It was like
I don't think so.
One of those, like, adult cartoons. The band was called Death Clock. I feel like they did a coffee jingle in, like, death metal style in the first episode, where people travel from all over the world to see one to Antarctica to see this one band play this one song that's just a coffee jingle. But man, that is a weird show. I don't remember much about now that I think about it, but wasn't that kind of a big deal, like, 10 years ago? Oh, man.
I think I should look it up, because there's a good chance that I've seen it.
And then also like historical Turisas with
Yes. Oh, man.
Yes.
They're an old favorite of mine.
yeah Varangian Way. That's one of
Yeah.
the best albums ever.
Yeah. I always feel kind of bad for that band, because I always thought like they wanted to be labeled like historical metal, but then instead they got labeled like Viking folk metal, which is not quite the same thing if you're focusing more on like history
Yeah.
than swords and face paint. They even got rid of the face paint eventually, I think. But I always thought like I always felt like there was some sort of like pressure on them to always like carry swords and stuff, and he's like, come on, I just want to tell some stories about cool stuff that actually happened. But what happened to them?
I don't know. I think the 5th album has been in the making for at least 8 years.
I always have my theories, of course, but they are just theories. My theory was that he just kind of got bummed out by the scene. Because the thing about, like, people wanting to carry swords, I think I read in an interview somewhere that, like, people would kind of lump you in with, like, the Ensiferums and the Finn Trolls and the stuff, and then you'd be like, hey, we wrote this really cool, like, album about history, and they'd be like, cool, go put on some completely inaccurate outfit for your photo shoot and, like, hold swords and cheer or something. And I can see how, like, if you're trying to be taken seriously, that would really bum you out. Especially, I think I did an interview with Jules Navari, who was known from Profane Omen and I guess Spirit, oh man.
Razor.
Spirit Razor, yes. Nice, nowadays. Shout out to him, he's a delightful fellow. Long story short of that was that, like, they wrote this really intense album about mental health and stuff, and then, like, Spine Farm released it with this thing that said, like, when you turn the music up, the brain cells go down. And they were just like...
Oh, fuck. Yeah, that's something.
Well, let's wrap this up with one more thing then. And I think that was just kind of a question that I wanted to ask. Like, what brought you guys into the idea of doing just, like, a whole extended world? And... because I feel like that's so interesting in so many ways to, like, be able to tell stories in this space. But then it also could be theoretically, like, limiting, too, that you might be just in this one area that you can work with. So, like, what are the pros and cons, and, like, what made you decide to go in that direction?
I think setting some sort of frames, not limits, but frames for the work can actually be inspiring. And because, like, it's the grey realms, so there are plenty of places to go and there are plenty of characters to focus on, or just the dialogue between them. Of course, there are times when it's tiring, or it's like I feel I'm writing something that's not fitting for that. So there are, for example, some songs, and when you look at the lyrics, instead of having Lilian, Odessa and Patrick singing something, then it's suddenly Anneli, Emily and Harri. So then it's kind of jumping away from the character to a more realistic universe, or so then that's possible, and then to jump back to the story. But yeah, who knows? Will Lost in Grey Forever be singing with these characters in that same universe, or will there be new stories or something?
To be continued.
Yes.
I'd say, like, if you were to release an album that's not set in that world, would you still do it under Lost in Grey's name?
I think we would, because no one limits us in any way. So.
Nice. So you could be as free as Machine Supremacy to just sometimes we write in the world and sometimes we do whatever we want.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe we'll invent whole new word for the album number X or something like that. So
Found in gray. Found in color.
But I do remember when we were writing, the album, the newest, and I was telling Harri, like, I'm never, ever going to write a concept album again, and then 5 seconds later, until I will do it the next time, but it was...
Yeah, well, of course it has its like challenges at times, but I think it's well worth the struggles. And I think for me it keeps the thing interesting also because I feel like I'm such a composer that my composing style is a bit like kerronnallinen, more like
narrative
kind of songs, which makes no sense.
Yeah, and also like you don't maybe also always compose individual songs, or it's more like a piece that consists of different parts, which then are the different songs. So they have some connection, or one song might end in a theme with which then the next song begins, or stuff like that. So it's
gonna be same kind of stuff on the upcoming album also.
Sweet. Well, I think all of us have to go change the timers on our cars, so
yes.
Shall we wrap this up? Yes. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this finally. I know we've been talking about it forever, so this is wonderful.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching, if anyone watches this.
Please do.